We're live! Hello,
Woo.
everybody. My name is Terry. Welcome to Renegade Society Radio. I am joined here by the incredible, multi talented actress, writer, gamer, of course, Aliza Pearl. Aliza, why don't you just say hi to everyone watching?
Hi, Aliza. It's Aliza
Aliza,
Pearl.
oh, I'm so sorry. I'm
It's
so
okay.
sorry.
We've only
Aliza,
ever really met in writing.
yes, the writing thing has been, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
Um, you have been the GM and player on all sorts of RPG shows for quite some time, actually. Now that I think about it, you're on the long running Geek and Sundry Star Trek adventure show, and you're now doing some stuff with Hyper RPG. I think even tonight you're going to be streaming Rat Queens, I believe.
Yep. Right after this,
Right
basically.
after this, just you can just jump over there and watch Aliza over there. And where else have we people seen your face?
Well, most recently, Callisto 6, which is the same crew of gamers and GM as we had on Shield of Tomorrow. So also on Geek and Sundry. Callisto 6 is like a cyberpunk superhero RPG. And it's super fun. Um, yeah, so I've been over there streaming on that. And I've popped up on different friends' streams here and there and in different games. But I think those are my three main like long running RPGs I've done. Oh, and I've also I did a web series called XP series, which is
Oh yeah.
yeah, it was the second season of a web series that's like a D&D story. So it is scripted. It's not like an actual live play game, but it's a scripted drama, like narrative comedic drama that takes place within a D&D game, like a bunch of friends just playing D&D and you see their relationships and things. So,
That's it's super amazing. Like how you have time for all of this is like it takes a long time. It takes a long time to get into it. We're going to talk a little bit. We have a little bit of news from Renegade, and then we're going to get into the main topic of talking about, playing and exploring RPGs, of course. But before we get into RPGs, another like pen and paper role experience that has just come out today is Hex Roller. So if you are a Renegade Games fan and you're interested or excited about puzzle type roll and write games, Hex Roller is fantastic. It's also fantastic if you've got a gaming group, say Overlight, and you're looking for like a filler game. You're waiting for someone who might be late, because let's be honest, there's always someone in your role playing group is just a little bit late. Hex Roller is a fantastic game for that. You can just roll some dice and you play this little puzzle, and it's scalable and it doesn't take a lot of time, so it's kind of a perfect like waiting game. Um, so that is out at your friendly local game store that you can pick up today, and it's really exciting. A lot of the folks we've sent to who've played it really enjoy it, and it's a great game because it's scalable. Play with you can play it by yourself, or you can play it with a lot of people, and it takes the same amount of time, which is really nice. So depending on how big your group is, you don't have to worry about that. We also have a really exciting fundraiser that we're doing right now. The link is in description. It is the Overlight t-shirt fundraiser that we are doing to support the Kaleidoscope Youth Center in Columbus. Eliza, I know I mentioned this to you. Have you had a look at it? Oh, Lisa,
believe
sorry.
that. Yeah, no, it's
Sorry.
okay. Yes, I did. I did take a look at it, and there is. I would encourage everyone who is interested in learning more about this organization to check out the. I believe it was like the fundraiser website that I saw. There's a little video about this organization in Ohio, and it is so wonderful. It's really great. They're doing amazing work. And my hope is that this type of organization exists in every part of our country, and because there are kids everywhere who could use this type of support and love and guidance. So,
It
yeah.
it's one of those things. So with the fundraiser, we're supporting LGBTQ youth. It's a youth center for younger individuals who might be disadvantaged because of who they are. And so, given that Overlight is a world that is a kaleidoscopic fantasy, it only made sense to us to support um, a a youth organization that is similarly kaleidoscopic in that sense. So you can wear your shirt with pride, your gamer colors with pride. Um, and it's kind of perfect timing because out in Columbus, where Origins Game Fair is being held, when you go out there for Origins, it just happens to coincide with their Pride Festival. So they have their celebrations over the weekend of Origins, and if you pick up the shirt at the fundraiser, you can actually pick up your shirt at the Renegade Game booth and wear your gamer colors with pride in support of a fantastic community organization in celebration of pride. And that shirt design is actually specifically designed for pride. It has the pink triangles on there as a call out to pride. So that's a special edition shirt that is only available through this fundraiser. So if you're excited or interested about that, we're really excited to be a part of this, and we're hoping to raise a good chunk of money for this fantastic organization.
I absolutely love that Overlight just like automatically, because it's so colorful and has the rainbow colors representing. It just like lends itself to being, you know, very strong, supportive for LGBTQ people in general. And yeah, I think it's so cool that you guys are doing this. So yay, thanks, Renegade.
Yay! um, the other thing is, we are going to be talking about RPGs today, and something else that's coming up a little bit after Origins and Columbus Pride is Free RPG Day. Now, that's going to be happening at your friendly local game store on June 15th. That's a Saturday. And if you go for Free RPG Day, they're going to have all sorts of free goodies and information and content for you to role play with at your friendly local game store. We're going to be contributing to that with our RPGs Kids on Bikes and Outbreak Undead. So if you're familiar or you're interested in checking those out, that is the place to be on June 15th. Head to your local game store and ask them for Kids on Bikes and Outbreak Undead content, and they'll have it for you. So we're really excited to be supporting that as well, and getting people out gaming in their community. Right, I think that's the thing that role playing can do, is we can bring people together, people of different backgrounds, and form our own little groups and communities and play together. And the last bit of announcement. Now, this is a special announcement specific to Overlight fans. We are going to be releasing, come August, a new module for Overlight. It is called the Ivory Mausoleum. We're really excited about it. And I'm going to tease a little bit about the story, but I'm not going to spoil anything. So this is on the back of the supplement. So, when you pick up the book, it's nothing inside. I'm not going to spoil anything, but basically, you and your party will be looking for a missing shipment, and as you go on your journey, there is this pair of villains, and in the back of the book calls them two individuals living their lives cast adrift with no light to guide them, and that is your adversary, or perhaps not, that you'll be facing in this module. We're really excited for this. The module will be available in stores in August, so it will be coming. It's full of beautiful art, more incredible paintings that you've come to expect. If you've seen the Overlight RPG book, it's an amazing adventure. It was written for groups who have already played Overlight and have more experienced characters. But if you're new, it's still suitable as well. You can still play it as your first adventure, but it's one of those adventures where after you've been a little more seasoned, you're better equipped to handle what'll come. So that's really exciting, and I'm really excited to share that with you today.
Ooh, sounds awesome. Wow.
It's gonna be amazing.
The Ivory Mausoleum, that's what it's called?
The Ivory Mausoleum.
Ooh.
It's you'll be able to find it at your local game stores, so be sure to ask them about it. Now's a great time to say, "Hey, I heard about this." Stop by, ask them about it. That way they know that you want it, because we want people playing in their stores. We want people talking to their stores about role playing games. And if you don't have a group, your friendly local game store is a fantastic place for that. It's a fantastic place to kind of meet people and have a community hub. So we highly recommend you reach out to them.
Awesome.
So now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, let's talk more about like role playing, and I'd love to hear how you got into role playing a little bit. Like what was your first game?
Okay, so my first game, I think I did play D&D first. That was the first RPG game I ever played. Not like a long campaign, but I just played like a one-off. And I was like, this is super cool. This is fun. But really, I think actually what brought me into role-playing games and role-playing was just being an actor and an improviser. So once I started doing improv, I was really hooked on it. Got really, really hooked on doing improv, and creating characters and just like finding relationship and story just through, listening by listening to each other and yes anding each other. And so the people that I met doing improv out here in LA, some of them were also gamers and were doing D&D and playing RPG games. And so there was a group called the Bearded Company. They used to be called the Bearded Men, but now they're called the Bearded Company. And they were doing a show at the time that was basically like a D&D fantasy game live on stage. And I watched that show a bunch of times. I was a huge fan of that show and of that group. They even had, for a time, they were live streaming that show, their fantasy show on Geek and Sundry. And I text for them one time and just like, yeah, and I'm good friends with all of them too. So I was like very much, you know, kind of on their doing. So then after that, I also at the time was doing and still am doing a live improvised Star Trek show called the Improvised Generation. And again, it's like we all play different characters that we've created, and over the course of these 5 seasons of our show, our characters have grown and changed, and it's all through improv. Like there's no planning. And if we have a seedling of an idea of what to do, like sometimes you come to the game table and you're like, okay, I want to do this and this and this. You might get to do one of those things, maybe, but it's entirely up to how the rest of the group decides to do things and how the game master does. So similar to that, narrative improv is a lot like that as well, where you can't really plot things out because who knows what'll happen.
It's interesting to me because you're not the first person. So I've come from a gaming background. I played games. I came into the hobby through games with no acting. Like I didn't even take drama in junior high school. Like it was never a thing that I experienced. So like what are the things that within improv that you can teach gamers like me? Like what are the things that I can bring into my games?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, gamers already have like a baseline understanding of improv because of gaming, because just the nature of RPGs, it is about like making decisions, and it's also about listening to what choices are available to you and figuring out what options and weighing them. I guess the difference though is that whereas in an RPG game you might have a little bit of time and breath and there's like space to make your decisions, and you can ask your like out of game, you can be like, what do you think, is this better? And you can like think about it a lot. In improv, it's very much that like jumping in. You're in the moment, you're there, you're playing the character. You, as an actor, as an improviser, you don't have time to just like step back and be like, okay, what am I going to say now? Am I going to move that way on the stage? Am I going to like bash this person? Or, you know, you don't have time to do that. So you just have to go with what your gut says, and then like let your own just instincts guide the story along, as well as with your ensemble.
So I
So I
guess
just like spontaneity is fun. Like, you know, maybe don't overthink your choices. Just do the thing that's on your mind and in your heart, and then don't worry about the results. Just do it.
that's so interesting, because I think that that's something that is a new concept, right? Like table talk is a part of my my group, because we're always trying to optimize, but in the
Mhm.
moment it might
Yep.
not be as true to our characters.
Mhm.
So it gives more, it puts more emphasis on embodying the role, as
Yeah.
opposed to like trying to
Mhm.
maximize for benefit within the game
Mhm.
mechanics, which is
Yeah.
an interesting like twist to those, you know, those situations, right?
Mhm. I think it could be really fun. Like I also value that too though. Like
Hmm.
when I did start doing a lot of like long campaigns, RPG campaigns, I did actually appreciate the fact that, oh, I can take my time and decide and weigh the options and ask like what's on that side of the trail, or if I go that way, what's, you know, can I see, how far down can I see? It's, so maybe it's like, you know, keep your regular game as is, but if things start starting to feel stale or slow, or you feel like people are getting swept up in the mechanics, maybe it's okay. It's okay to just like make a big decision and go for it. And then, you know, it's also fun to just do a one shot for that reason too.
You
Like,
know, that's such great insight, right? Like when we are, and like as I think as players too, like I as a player, um when I'm in the moment and I'm just feeling my character, sometimes I do the impulsive thing, and sometimes I'll do the
mhm,
crazy thing, and sometimes I'll do the thing that isn't optimal, that makes my entire group go, "Oh, why did you do that?"
yeah.
But it
Yeah.
feel like, I think those are also the moments that you remember, right? Those are the
Mhm.
moments that stay, as opposed
Yeah.
to like when you're tweaking or trying to squeeze
Mhm.
every last bit out of a game, right?
Yeah, totally. And it's so important to check in with, you know, with your
Hmm.
fellow players, I guess, before you do things like that. But it is also great to just kind of dive in and be more impulsive, because I think what's great about RPG games is is that you like you have this character that you care about so much, and you've like spent so much time creating them and thinking about their backstory, and you've created relationships with your fellow players. But I think sometimes if you're too precious with that character, your character, you're not going to get to like explore as much as you could with that character. Like if you just give them a good foundation, kind of like I guess like with kids, like I don't
Hmm.
have kids, but so I don't know if this metaphor works, but like with kids, you know, you raise them and you feed them and you water them and you teach them and you send them off to school, and then at a certain point they're on their own, and you have to just be like, well, I gave them the foundation and I groomed them, but now they have to do it themselves. So you can kind of do that with your character.
You
Like,
know, that's a so I have a daughter. That's a valid, like
oh,
that
okay.
no one has ever framed it like that though, like the idea of growing uh, what you're essentially doing is you're growing a fictional person, right? And the idea
Yeah.
is
Mhm.
the points as when we think about being ourselves or living our lives, it's those moments of risk and reward, and those are the
Mhm.
things that stick, and those are the things that
Right.
build character, right? And
Yeah.
so that totally makes sense when it comes to like your RPG character. It's
Mhm.
those moments of risk and reward, and those moments where you can just like let them make that decision, what feels true, as
Mhm.
opposed to what feels optimal.
Right.
And it's
Right.
a trap, right? Like, so it's one of those things where finding that balance
Mhm.
within your group and within the frame of the game, and you know, making sure that it's true, but also like respectful of the people you're playing with, because you still have to
Yeah.
play with them. These are your friends.
Mhm. Mhm.
um and
Yeah.
fitting that in, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like you said though, like honestly, my most memorable moments of playing Talon on Shield of Tomorrow were the ones where I was not in control of the character. Like, she, at some point, I very clearly felt that she was in charge. Talon was the one making decisions, not Aliza. It's weird to say, like, but
It's
like, I don't, I'm not saying like I lost myself in the character or anything, but I did, like, I think she had lived enough life that I was like, well, Talon, what do you want to do? What will you do in this moment? And she was like, I want to rage. And so we had a Vulcan rage, and it was fun and crazy. And I'll never forget that game where
it's
Talon went on a Vulcan rage.
and I mean, in the moments, if it's true, right? Like Vulcans have those moments, right? It's amazing
Yeah.
it's amazing to have those moments too. It's amazing to like let that character make those decisions,
Mhm.
because that it's not just the table anymore. That's when the moments of immersion really happen, right?
Yeah.
So let us know in the comments, if you've had those moments like that in your role playing games. We'd love to hear it. I know, because I think that those are the moments that stick with you. So if you've got a memorable moment, let us know in the chat. We're happy to check those out and call out to them. But since you were talking about being a player, like, how does it shift? Like, how does that improv skill, that player experience, how does that shift when you're on the other side of the screen?
Mhm. Well, so when I was GMing Fractured Paradox, um, I mean, it was very different, but it made my brain happy in a different way, because
Mm.
now I was kind of the manager of this story. Like, it was my duty to like help bring this world to life and set a stage so that my players could come and play and explore and do whatever they could to have their characters grow and be changed and act upon their impulses. So it was much more, coming into it was much more, I would say, more cerebral than it was
Mm.
with as a like a player. So it wasn't, just like, as a player, I spent a lot of time thinking about backstory, thinking about cultural influences and upbringing, education, big important friendships and relationships in my character's life, and then seeing how the stats also like inform those things, or vice versa. You start with the stats and then say, well, she's very brave according to her stats. Why is that? Oh, it's because she was
Mm.
chased by a baby cougar when she was a kid, and she stared it down and ran away, so it made her brave. Like that type of thing.
Mhm.
Whereas as a GM, I came into it, just kind of taking in the entire world and the mechanics of it, and seeing. I do remember, like, when I was preparing to GM Fractured Paradox, looking, just like soaking in all the mechanics and how this world works, how this game works, and seeing how that's translated into the narrative parts of the setting. And then from there, I added my own take, which was like, for me, it was like just the kaleidoscopic part. It's like, how many ways can something break apart? How many ways can light break apart? And
Mm.
what does that mean when it does? What are the implications? Um, um, yeah, when if something is infinitely breakable and changeable, then what do you hold on to? And so for our party, I think by the end of our episode, our 6 episode arc, they were a party,
Yeah.
like, because they had so many different fractures, and they each like went through a lot. They then were like solidified. Their bond was solidified.
I I think that that's really interesting, the idea of like, well, first of all, bringing your own color to a world that as a GM, right? Because that is something that you have to do. It doesn't matter the game, but like there are certain constraints in the Overlight world that you have to like you yourself have to think about and adjust for. Like, how do you, as a GM, deal with the lack of like apparent passage of time? Like, that's a concept
Yeah. Mhm.
we here in this reality don't, that's a mainstay for us, but like when you're in a kaleidoscopic fantasy and that's not a thing,
Right.
how how do you deal with that? So
Mhm.
what were the things that you found, when you talk about that cerebral element, like when it comes to Overlight and GMing Overlight, what were the things that you tackled, and how did you tackle those elements?
So definitely, like you said, just the nature of this world with the seven floating shards and no days, no nighttime, no months, no years, no minutes. Yeah, that was one thing that early on I was like, okay, I like just absorbed that that was the fact. And then I kind of set it aside because I was like, I have no idea how I'm going to tell people how much time has passed. So I just kind of set it aside until I could come back to it and had like absorbed more information from the core book. Um, so that was one, just the and the idea of travel, like travel. I actually, when I first saw the artwork and saw the book, and saw the beautiful like layout of these worlds floating atop of each other. I was like, oh, that's cool. So we can like go to this one and then go to this one and then this episode. And then I started reading the book and it was like, travel is major. It's not something that you can't just like hop from shard to shard. And I'm actually glad for that because it helped rein me in. Like, I would have been like, okay, now you have to go there. I would have been having my poor players jump from Nova all the way down to Pyre in one episode or something crazy. And just like just because I was like, I want to explore this world. I want them to be everything. But thank goodness the book was like, no, don't do that. Like, I was very grateful for that.
It makes it easier, like to create like a more constrained narrative, right? Like, and it also
Yeah.
puts more emphasis on like on what's happening there as opposed to just like trying to it. This isn't like a you know, you can do exploration over time, but I feel like it's more like a reward, right? Like you get
Yeah,
to get
exactly.
there. You earn that travel. You earn that
Mhm.
new adventure.
Yeah. And I mean, these are 7 continents. So even you I'm sure like we could have spent all 6 of our episodes and beyond that on one shard because there's
Mhm.
so much to explore. It's there's so many different people and forms of life and little corners to populate. Um, and I'm excited to, you know, like just play this again and GM this again and see who else is there, who else are on the shards that we've already been to, and then if we get to go to another shard, what's going on there?
You know, I think that it's a really exciting world to explore. Like it's an exciting universe to explore. Like when I describe kaleidoscopic fantasy, I try to distance it from the things we normally associate with fantasy. Like it's just like, you know, there's some like they're kind of humans and they live in the city here and they're but there's this other stuff that's like unique to it, right? There are you know there are certain takes that might be familiar from other mythologies and stuff, but it's nothing that you have necessarily seen
Oh,
elsewhere.
oh, there. Sorry, I lost you for a
Oh,
minute. I
so-
didn't catch. You were saying
oh
like there are some similarities to D&D as
yeah.
or to fantasy
Oh
as we
yeah,
are used to.
there's some fantasy elements that are like you know in some ways they're like familiar things like you know they're humans, right?
Right, right.
But like it's not as though we have you know this one for one or this thing that just like generic fantasy is it there doesn't happen to be an application of that. I
Mhm.
was describing it once and I'm like, well, there are kind of like these like you know big red you know they're kind of like trolls but they're kind of not and they're really strong and they value might and then there's these like they're kind of like Pikachu and Bulbasaur like mixed together and they're like it's this like and then there's these people who like bond with monkeys and they're like a pair together and it's this this thing where in trying to describe this world it it it's not as common in terms of our cultural vernacular yet.
Mhm.
um how do you like you know describe it to people when they're like you know so what is this thing like how
Mhm.
what are the ways what are the touch points that you kind of gravitated to when you first
Mhm.
came and discovered Overlight and what were the things that you hooked onto and connected with you.
Yeah, so in terms of describing it to other people, I always started with the term kaleidoscopic fantasy because it's such a fresh term. I think a lot of people don't have, like you said, there are certain things when you hear like just classic D&D type fantasy, you think of elves and you think of orcs, and you have these things that you immediately assign to it. But I like that the term itself, kaleidoscopic fantasy, is so fresh, and no one really has things assigned to it because everyone's like, wait, what is that? So I definitely would lean into just the fact that it's a very colorful world, and there's no passage of time as we know it, so it's very fantasy based, and the floating continents, and then going into the fact that, okay, yeah, similar to D&D, it has these different types of people and different types of animals, but the types are not, there's no one-to-one, the way that you said. I kind of similarly say that too. And then the dinosaur birds, I always tell people about that because those are so fun. Tyrexians are so cool.
I mean, serpent flying lizards with feathers,
right?
of all colors. They're just,
and they're the scholars. I love that they're just the learned ones, and it's so cool.
I mean, I think that those are the really interesting. They're really interesting from an art perspective too, because that's the other thing where I'm just when I describe this game to people and I invite people to check it out, the first thing I do is pull up the art, because it is so evocative of just what that means, and it's easy for me to see myself with the vivid colors and the diversity of the different races, and the fact that they're all also humans, but they each have a very, very different perspective. But I love the fact that when you're playing it, the virtues are a thing, and the virtue driven, it feels like it doesn't feel dark, and I know it's called Overlight and it seems weird, but it doesn't have that it feels like you're a superhero helping and true. You're true, right?
Yes. When I first read the core book, my thought was oh my goodness, this is like X-Men but fantasy. It totally is. They're basically superheroes, and it's a world that they don't know what to do with superheroes yet. So they're kind of not they are a little ostracized, but mostly they're isolated. They're separated by choice, but also kind of by convention, depending on the culture. It's so typical for the Skyborn to leave their home and to go do something else instead of staying and helping or helping. There might be other Skyborn who haven't been activated or so it's really cool to look at it that way, with that superhero element. And then you asked before about the touchstones for me, and similar to what you're saying about loving seeing people with different skin tones and humans who look different, but also there's so much diversity of species too, of intellect, intelligent species. As a GM, one of my touchstones absolutely was being able to bring in NPCs and have them play people who were not by default what we consider normal in the US, or the default or the mainstream. One of my favorite NPCs to play was Jimba, for that reason, because she was just a little red panda tree lady who is ancient and very wise, and I played her like one of my great aunts from Newark, New Jersey, or from South Carolina.
That's so amazing.
Her soul was a Black woman's soul. And I loved being able to breathe that type of life into a fantasy RPG game, where I think a lot of characters don't really get that kind of shade and that kind of specificity.
Yeah, and when I talk about, anyone can see themselves in this world, and everyone can see themselves or see their loved ones or see the connections that they have. There's room for that, and it's not. I don't want to I love my murder hobo group, but sometimes you don't want to be a murder hobo. There are times where there are other things you can do in role playing, and so for me, being able to see myself in this universe so easily was one of the things that I totally drew me to it. When I knew we talked a little bit about it, but maybe you can go into it a little more about like when you're tackling, creating your view of this game world, how did you approach that? What were the things that people who are looking to GM this game, what are the things that you could share with them, or what tips for dealing with the conventions that are a little bit out there?
Sure. So I, as you said before, I didn't want to just kind of like lift Overlight from the book, from the page, and just put it on, on our stream. I could have, because it's so rich and there's so much beautiful stuff in here to create narrative from. But I did want to make it a little bit more unique. Like I wanted to add, my own input, and then give room and give like a specific, not a direction, but like a loose theme for my players to kind of discover. And it's not something I really told them ever, but there was a theme, and I kind of said it before in very general lofty terms. But so when I approached it, and when I started like creating the arc of that our season, I decided I wanted a theme. I wanted something that could anchor my story into the world and into the mechanics of the game. And so what I kept coming back to was paradoxes and prisms. Prisms clearly, kaleidoscopic fantasy and all the colors. So prisms were always kind of like a visual I had in my mind, and then paradoxes like optical illusions and again like the idea of something breaking into infinity, or colors that constantly are fracturing off. And so I kind of like took those visual images, and I did some research on them and on paradoxes. And I found some philosophers, which sadly I don't remember the names now. I do have my notes somewhere I could find, but I found several different philosophers from different eras who wrote about paradoxes. And some of those writings, they were like flags. They just were like, here we go, and it really helped me anchor some key visual moments in our Fractured Paradox campaign. So like I don't want to give, if anyone hasn't watched it yet, I'll just give a little tease. I won't spoil anything. No spoilers, but there is one visual element that happens fairly early on in the game, where they enter a cave, and they're seeing all these, like, it's not just the fractured light of the chroma, but it's just another take on that kind of feeds into the chroma and is like a variation of it. Because I figure if the overlight can be fractured, can be like can be focused in and filtered through the Skyborn for the chroma, and there's an overlight that people don't understand yet, or different like manifestations of the overlight where it interacts with something in nature that people are just like, I don't know what that is. So I kind of created one. Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's a really interesting touch point, though, the idea of finding and anchoring your game as a GM in a theme with your perspective, right? Because I mean, I think that like I love the idea that you were able to put your lens on it, right? Like that's what every GM should be doing. As much as like there's a lot of world in that. The point of it is it's not just for players to create within it and play within their bounds, but there's a reason why role-playing games give so much opportunity for GMs to shape that world. It's because that's kind of the point, right? It's to create that world for you to enjoy and for your players to enjoy within the framework that works for you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And when it came to character creation, with like, how do you as a GM, when it comes to like your players creating their characters, how were you involved in that process? Was that a thing that you were hinting at, or you're pulling hooks from them after they've created these characters? Like, what was the process for you as the GM of Fractured Paradox, and just in general, like when you GM games or as a player?
Well, so this was my first time as a GM, as you know.
Oh,
Well, it was my second time technically,
mhm.
but the first time I GM'd ever was on stream for Weave Society, which is
Yeah.
now called TBD RPG on Geek and Sundry. So that's wild. That that was a little intimidating to do it for the first time. In while many people were watching, many more experienced GMers and RPG players were watching.
Yeah.
But I think I knew early on, even back when I was watching my friends do their D&D improv show, I was like, oh man, I think I want to be a GM someday. I want to like, and maybe even a DM. But I was like, I love that idea of, as much as I love playing a character in a game, I also love the idea of kind of setting up pins for people to knock down, or having a player or a character surprise me and me having to be like, okay, this is what, and shift to like figure out what the world is now doing around this person. And I've always been drawn to that. So
Mhm.
then after like a couple of years of doing RPG more steadily, when I got the invite to GM on Weave Society, I was like, yes, please, yes, please, yes, please, yep, please, please, please. And then when Overlight also was offered to me to GM, I was like, absolutely, yes, please, yes, yes, yes. So I'm a baby GM. I still call myself a baby GM. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. There's so many amazing GMs I've watched and learned from, and I still plan to like keep learning and GMing my friends and my family, like off stream so that I can get some more experience. Now I forgot what the original question was.
Well, I mean, I think that like with your improv background too, like being a GM, like that really helps as a GM, right? Being able to roll in that moment because there's
Mhm.
no one to table talk with. There's
Yeah,
no pause there.
yeah. Oh,
You know,
I
and
will
you're in
say,
service
oh,
of the players, right?
what's that?
And you're in service of the players too, which is a very
Absolutely.
improv approach.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Being supportive of the ensemble and of the story rather than stepping out and doing your own thing.
Mhm.
Um, and I will say, like, another thing about GMing that I learned in the moment of doing Overlight is that for our last episode, I had like a pack like this thick, like half an inch to an inch thick of index cards with NPC stats. Because I was like, if they go here, I have these NPCs, and oh, we already met this one. What if we go back to that shard? I don't know what'll happen. So I was like, I had all these NPCs, like a huge stack of index cards, and I sit down at the table, I unpack everything, and I left that at home.
Oh,
So I didn't have my NPC stats. I literally had to just roll with it and had to adjust and do a lot of improv and look things up in the book really quickly and be like, okay, those are the stats. Oh, I remember now that person was based on this general stat for this species, and just kind of like remake the NPC. And that was a really good lesson for me because I think other people can probably relate to this, but it's like I love preparation. I love being able to like just absorb a lot of info and then make a plan and then have that plan with me, and even if I don't use it, but have it. And so not having those index cards really was kind of the universe being like, "You got this. Just go do it. It's fine. You're gonna have fun. Just like, listen to your players, connect with them, and you know the world. Just go back to that. Go back to go back to the book if you need it." So
well, I
it was a
mean,
good
I think in those moments too, that's when you're just like, yeah, I can bring my great aunt into this
lesson.
NPC now. This is perfect, right?
Right, exactly.
And it gives you that opportunity to pull from your life experience as well. I mean, it when you're prepared, it always like I know GMs who are like super prepared, always like they've got things ready, but then you have the wonky player who throws something out of left field anyways, and those plans go away. So
Mm,
it's it's always this experience of having to adjust and readjust and work in service of the characters and the story and the greater adventure.
mhm.
And that experience is collective, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, Sarah has jumped into the chat and was saying how she is so impressed and inspired by your GM skills.
Oh,
We have many fans here at
Sarah.
Renegade Games.
Thank you. Thank you,
So,
Sarah. Thank you so much.
um, so when it comes to like, if this was your first GM experience, like, what are the things that players can do to help their GMs? Because I know that I'm one of those players who sometimes is guilty of like making my GM's life harder, and that's like,
Oh,
and
we're all
I
guilty of that at this point.
right, but like I my GMs, I'm nice, I'm lucky enough to have GMs who don't take it back on me. My dice do it for them, so that
Yeah.
karma evens out that way. But what are things that like players can do to help a GM just generally? What are the things that you know when we're working with a GM, what are the things that are helpful to help you with your story? What are the things that we can do to be to also work with you?
Ooh, I think from the GMing I've done and from the actual like role playing as a character that I've done, I would say maybe just having like a pretty good grasp of what your character can do, and ask questions if you have them, um, you know, outside of the game, especially because then you can really like get into like the nitty gritty of mechanics and things like that with your GM outside of the game, so that when you are playing, you don't have to like be slowed down by like looking things up and things like that. And then, I mean, I think I've I've had like such great GMs as a player and then such great players as a GM. And one thing that they all did was just yes and each other and listen. I think the only stressful moments I have are when, as an improviser, like the yes and is sacred. And you can say no as a character, and your character can oppose someone else for sure. But then there's a difference between like saying no as your character and saying no as the player. And I'll try to describe that a little more because it's kind of like hard to just,
Yeah.
grasp in two sentences. But it's the difference between making a choice as your character that is true to the character, and it might put you up against another player, but it makes for a really cool, fun like interaction and conflict that can be then resolved and figured out, versus as a player making a decision that shuts out your fellow players. And it's almost better to just like, if your character's having issues with another player, just kind of play it out and air it out, rather than being like, I don't want to engage with them. Because then it makes it hard as the GM to kind of like try to wrangle everyone's egos or
Yeah.
their, what they really want to get out of the game in the moment, to bring them back together, to like get to play together and be delighted by each other.
I mean, I
So
think, yeah, there's a difference between like playing conflict and just not playing, and playing not playing is it's not fun for anyone around the table, right? Like,
mhm.
and the
Yeah.
players enjoy, like, if your fellow player, you're playing I had a game where I picked up someone just decided to play a mute who didn't like people. Like, they were a hermit who didn't speak.
Mhm.
And it's just
Mhm.
that's a different thing than playing someone who's just like disagreeing, or like that conflict cycle is a
Mhm.
different dynamic, and you actually play that dynamic,
Yes.
and rather than just like not I have a character here and they don't interact, or they refuse to engage, and
Mhm.
it's different and more challenging. I can see why
Oh
that's
yeah.
really hard one for GM too.
Yeah, and the cool thing is like when a player decides to play a character like that. So let's say someone who doesn't speak at all and someone who doesn't like other people. That's a huge challenge, and I think it's awesome for players to challenge themselves with characters, but also be open to maybe getting some notes or some like suggestions on how to like how to like really fully play that character in a way that does help the game move forward and help you all have a good time together. I got some really good advice that I then passed on to another player that I was in a game with. And it was that if you're playing someone who hates people just in general, sure, play that character, but play them in a way that means that the only people they don't absolutely hate are their party members.
Oh, that's interesting because I mean, I think that it works, right? Because like
Mm-hmm.
ultimately you have to have big motivating hooks,
Yeah,
right?
why are they there? Because like if you play someone who hates all people, why are they in this adventuring party with other people? Like
Yeah.
you got to find a hook. Yeah. And if it can be a heart hook, it can be a brain hook. Well, it makes sense because I might not survive this winter. I do need to band together with people, or like make sure there's a hook, there's a reason for them to stay, and at least at least something. Find like one tiny thing in each of your party members that you absolutely love. And you can hate the rest. You can be like, "Oh, I hate it when you say this and you hate it when you make those jokes," but you adore their little weird eyelash. I don't know. Like just find something about that character that you hate, that you love, and because you need to come back to the table somehow.
It's that's such great. Like I mean, it's ultimately really great advice, right? Like it works for everyone who's
Mhm.
playing a character who's playing a collaborative story, essentially, right? You have to find those motivating elements to keep your character engaged in that story as well. Um, so when it comes to uh your improv, you're using this thing with yes and like when you talked about the sacredness of yes and can you like maybe explain for people who are watching and like listening and learning what
Mhm.
is yes and how like what are the ways that you've incorporated it into your role playing games, whether that's as a player or as a GM?
Sure. Again, this is another concept that's just like naturally built into RPG, tabletop RPG. So, in terms of improv, yes and means that when you step out on stage with another improviser, if they say, "Wow, the weather today on the moon is very warm and sunny," you your next line should not be something that's like, "We're not on the moon, we're in Florida, dummy."
Mhm,
That so you're basically like you're negating, you're just like saying no to their offer. Or
mhm,
whereas like they step out and say, "Wow, the weather on the moon today is really sunny and warm." And you say, "Yes, I'm so glad we figured out how to terraform the moon." Or say something, or you say, "I really love living with you here. Wow, look at me bounce around like low gravity." You're basically saying yes to their offer and you're adding something to it. And there are other like shades of it. So yes and is always the goal, and the sacredness of yes and is improv. There's also like yes but, which is not great. It's not super helpful. So it would be you're saying yes, we're on the moon, but we have to leave right now. And it's like, oh, that's okay. That's okay. You're still yesing, but you're constantly like, someone's tossing you, like setting you up for the spike, and you're just like, nope, I'm not gonna spike it. I'm just gonna throw the ball all the way over there out of the court. And then there's also no wait. So there's no, and there's like no, but, and that's kind of the
mm.
same idea. No, we're not on the moon, but we're going swimming now. Like just something completely not connected to what your partner has offered you. So it's about listening. It's about really taking in and accepting someone's offer, whether it's information, whether it's like a character they've named you as or named themselves as. It's saying yes to it all and adding something to it that helps move it forward, move the scene forward.
And like that's such a I mean, I think intuitively gamers who are playing role playing games and who have played role playing games, you know, we do this, but we just
Yes.
don't have the vocabulary of improv to like say, "Oh, this is what we're doing when we say, you know, that that actually happened. Yes, I have
Mhm.
1 hit point now and I'm 3 feet tall and
Right,
this is
right.
just what's happening," right? And
Yep.
you go with it. When you're GM, you don't you wouldn't necessarily your GM wouldn't say, you don't know what's behind that door, and you go, "Yes, I do."
Right, yeah.
That dynamic doesn't work, and it's the same with players
Mhm,
when you're interacting, right? That
mhm.
dynamic doesn't work. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
oh my
Mhm.
gosh, someone who is a fan of you, uh, Techie Carer is saying hi. He loves you as D on Rat Queens. So
Aw. Thank you, Techie Carer. I hope I said that right. I can't see the chat. Is that okay?
It's
Should I?
okay. It's okay.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
saying hi. You can again.
Hi.
We mentioned right after this. You're heading right off to Rat Queen, so you
Mhm.
can find them on Hyper RPG. But one last question before you go. What was the most I don't know if you can handle this without spoilers, but what was the most memorable thing that you you experienced on the show? What that could be a thing that happened off screen, that could be something one of the players told you after the game. Like, what
Mm.
was the thing that
Oh wow.
sticks with you?
There's a few actually. There's I feel like there's a handful. Okay, I will choose one, maybe two, to
But that's
tell you.
okay. Two is fine.
Um, so I think story wise, there is a big thing that happens. I think it was the last or next to last episode, so I won't spoil it. But it was, again, it was that sense of, as the GM, I had set up certain things about the world and about the people around them, the NPCs, that I knew to be true, and of course could change or could adapt depending on what the party wanted to do or what was going through and needed. And then they made some amazing calls and did some incredible actions, and it forced me to just let loose, and something very big and like otherworldly happens that I did not plan. The players, we all were just like kind of going along with it as it happened, and it was very cool. And it was one of those moments where I felt like the game and the story itself came to life, and we were all just there to kind of like toss the ball up and keep it in the air. So that was fun. I can't get into,
Being able
you know.
to have those moments though where it's a surprise, like you as the GM are surprised but your players are surprised with you, like the whole thing happening together is such a beautiful moment.
Yeah, it's magical. It really is. It's like magic. Like, so wonderful. And then another, well, there's a few. I really love that party. I love, the party that we had, um and all of their characters were so unique, and they all, to me, like, by the like end of the campaign, they fit together like a puzzle. Like, they complemented each other with their skills and all their abilities and chroma, and all of their virtues. It just felt like they were the fabric of that party was really nice and cozy, and powerful too.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of moments like where that kind of sparkled for me in the game.
Oh, well, that's a perfect, I think that's a perfect way to kind of sum up, that series, just sparkly and you know, like this, almost like this mosaic coming together, that like where it's a whole, but it's like it's still, unique and different. So I I I think we're just about time. So thank you all for tuning in and watching. Um, why don't you let people know where they can find you, follow you, like
Sure.
keep up with you?
Okay, yeah, sure. So I'm at Aliza Pearl, Aliza Pearl, like pearl earring. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. I am doing random things with Nerdist and Geek and Sundry and Hyper RPG. Currently, I am on Rat Queens that streams on Hyper RPG every Wednesday p.m. Pacific time. And yeah, I'm a random person, so I do a lot of random things. So I hope you just follow along and let me know if you're into what I'm doing.
It's awesome. And I mean, I think that I think we'll first of all of your socials are in the description of this video, so do follow. Also, all of Renegade's socials are also in the description down below, so you can find us on Twitter at Play Renegade, on Facebook at PlayRGS, and at Renegade_Game_Studios on Instagram, and keep up with us there. We, obviously we do a lot of different kinds of games, not just board games, because we have incredible role-playing worlds, and we're continually growing our games. So keep up with us there. Thank you again so much for joining me today. This was a wonderful conversation. I don't want to keep you because you have somewhere to be very soon. So we'll say goodbye. Thank you all
All
for
right.
watching.
Thank you so much, Terry, and thank you, Renegade, and thank you everyone watching.
Uh,